الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله الملك الحق المبين، شهادة عدل وصدق نلقاه بها يوم الدين، وأشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وحبيبه، بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة وكشف الغمة، وجاهد في الله حق الجهاد حتى أتاه اليقين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله وعلى أصحابه وأتباعه ومن اهتدى بهديه وعمل بسنته إلى يوم الدين، وارض عنا معهم بفضلك وكرمك أرحم الراحمين. اللهم آمين. All praise is due to Allah, the creator of heavens and earth, our cherisher, our sustainer, the source of our guidance and wisdom, the source of power and strength. I bear witness that there is no deity in this universe that is worthy of worship or devotion save Allah. And I bear witness that Muhammad is Allah's final prophet and messenger, the bearer of glad tidings, our role model and example, our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, the members of his family, his descendants, his companions and students and their followers, and every man or woman that walks in their footsteps or adheres to their path until the day of judgment. And I ask Allah to make all of us among them. Allahumma ameen. My brothers and sisters, I greet you with the greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is the month of Al-Muharram. It is one of the sacred and sanctified months in the Islamic calendar. It is one in which the Prophet ﷺ used to fast a lot. They actually say that after Ramadan, the Prophet used to fast so many days in the 2 months, Sha'ban and the month of Al-Muharram. It is a month in which we need to observe our behavior, to minimize any acts of conflict or aggression that we might find ourselves compelled to commit. We should always be mindful of our actions, mindful of our words, and how we treat others in this month, and understand that in Al-Ashhur Al-Hurum, the sacred months, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala multiplies the penalty for aggression. So always remember this. Last week, I spoke about Musa alayhi salam, and I spoke about the day of Ashura and what it represents. And I remember that Friday night of last week, I also spoke to, however, a much smaller audience about those two movements of non-violent resistance that we remember on the day of Ashura in the month of Muharram. One of them was led by Musa alayhi salam against the tyranny of Pharaoh, and the other non-violent resistance movement was organized by Imam al-Husayn ibn Ali radiallahu anhuma against the tyranny of the Umayyads. Two movements that sought social change while wanting to minimize bloodshed, while wanting to minimize conflict, using non-violent means to bring social changes to their societies. Incredible notions, incredible lessons for us to learn in this ever-changing world of ours, brothers and sisters. And I, inshallah ta'ala, remind myself and I remind you in these beautiful days to remember the legacy of both those two great men, Musa alayhi salam and Imam al-Hussein ibn Ali radiallahu anhu. And looking at the state of the world and what we experience and the ever-changing news that are coming to us every day, it is important for us as Muslims, as a community, to understand the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of changing societies. To see that kingdoms and governments are rising and others are falling. The people of the world are rising against tyranny and dictatorship and taking matters of justice into their own hands, replacing tyrants and hopefully installing people, leaders that actually represent the aspirations of millions and millions of people. Looking at that, it is important for us to understand the manner, the method, and the instruments by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes the world and help us change ourselves in the course of it. And I wanted us today, inshallah ta'ala, in the next possibly half hour, to delve a little bit deeper into the story of Musa alayhi salam and the deliverance of the Israelites from Egypt, which is what we remember, one of the things at least that we remember in the month of Muharram on the day of Ashura. Musa alayhi salam, when he was delivered, when he crossed the sea with the Israelites, he fasted on that day. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, to honor the legacy of Musa alayhi salam and the deliverance of people of faith, he too fasted on that day as well. But what is it that was so incredible about Musa's journey into Sinai and then into Palestine that we need to remember today? And let me, inshallah, go through this step by step. The first question I wanted to ask myself and ask you as well: why was it so hard and so difficult for Pharaoh to deliver the Israelites, to just let them go? Musa alayhi salam came to him and he asked, would you let my people go? Why is it that it was so difficult for him to accept that, to acquiesce with the request, with the admonition of Musa alayhi salam? And as people say in this day and age, it's all about money, it's all about the economy. You have a tremendous labor force of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of slaves that are working in your society, right? They represent the capital, they represent the assets, the wealth that most people had. They were servants, they were butlers, they were workers, they were builders, they were engineers. They did most of the work that the Egyptian elite did not want to do, right? Why would we as an elite, as people in control, let go of very free, possibly free, very, very cheap, possibly free labor force such as the Israelites, right? The Israelites to the Egyptians were very similar to blacks to whites in this country over the past 200 years. Why give them their freedom? They work for free. They do the stuff I ask them without questioning. Why do I have to have accountability and get myself in trouble? If I can keep the situation as is, then be it, right? It was very similar to the way Mexicans are treated in this country, in this day and age. It is very similar to how Bengalis and South Asians are treated in Saudi Arabia, or the Filipinos and how they are treated in the UAE and Qatar. It is the same slavery in disguise. Bringing entire populations who had no other choice, put them under extremely difficult and tough conditions, require them to work at minimum wage or below, right? So there was a racial question about it. We are Egyptians, those are Israelites, there are slaves, we should not let them go. But there was the bigger issue of the economy. It would have caused the collapse of Egyptian economy at the time. So Pharaoh refused, right? But what is the main request that Musa alayhi salam had to Pharaoh? Was he asking Pharaoh to relinquish power and to give up his dominion? No. Was he asking Pharaoh to convert to Islam and to accept the religion of Musa alayhi salam? No. Was he preaching that religion to the people of Egypt at the time? No. None of that. The main request that Musa alayhi salam had: deliver my people. Let my people go. Now let me ask you a question. How many of the people of Egypt at the time of Musa alayhi salam actually accepted Musa as a prophet? Very, very few. In fact, the Quran talks about one, right? وَقَالَ رَجُلٌ مِّنْ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ يَكْتُمُ إِيمَانَهُ. A man from the followers of Pharaoh that was hiding his faith. Very few people in Egypt converted to the religion of Musa alayhi salam. Why? Were they fearful of Pharaoh? Of course there was a little bit of that. But I dare to say that the people of Egypt did not follow Musa alayhi salam mainly because Pharaoh was able to manipulate them. They obeyed him. They actually liked him as a leader. He had this method by which he would build consensus before he moves forward. In the ayah in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, on behalf of Pharaoh, he says to his people, ذَرُونِي أَقْتُلْ مُوسَى وَلْيَدْعُ رَبَّهُ. Let me kill Musa and let him pray to his false God. Probably he's not going to listen to him anyway. Why is Pharaoh the tyrant asking his people, right? Let me kill Musa. Guys, why don't you let me kill Musa? Because he wants to build consensus in his society. He doesn't want people to rise against him. He does not want Musa alayhi salam to become a martyr, right? He wants the media and his advisors and his entourage to justify any possible action that he wants to take against Musa alayhi salam. Do you understand the politics of it all? He is keeping a society and is requesting them to believe in him as a god. I mean, this is a big thing to ask. And if you were to do that, you want to make sure that the media is on your side, that the corporations are on your side, that the established families are on your side. You want to make sure that you don't move forward with a move that big, I mean, kill someone that used to be the prince of Egypt at some point, without making sure that people actually agree with what you're saying. And here's something really interesting. You will relate to this. What was his reasoning for taking the life of Musa alayhi salam? ذروني أقتل موسى وليدع ربه إني أخاف أن يبدل دينكم أو أن يظهر في الأرض الفساد. He relates back to the same argument that every tyrant uses. I am worried that Musa might change your religion and corrupt your traditional ways. You see how religion has been used to effect changing in the political process? Thousands of years ago. It was making the same argument. I am just worried that Musa might corrupt your religion. That minority, if we let them practice the religion and have the freedom to travel and to do this and to do that, they might corrupt us, the majority. The establishment, the traditional values of our country will be hurt if we let them do it. Does that ring a bell? Have you heard of that before? All these arguments that were used historically to reject the other are all based on the same foundation. We are worried of the Irish, we're worried of the Jews, we're worried of the Catholics, we're worried of the African Americans, and now we're worried of the Muslims. Why? Because they might change the traditional fabric of American society. Because they might change our values and corrupt our values with their new religion, with their new ways, with their new customs and traditions. Right? It's the same exact thing. Pharaoh used that to justify making a possible move on Musa alayhi salam, and people bought into this, right? Not to the extent that they allowed him to kill him. He never actually attempted to kill Musa alayhi salam, but they supported him and never listened to Musa. And Allah describes that in the Quran, and He says, فَاسْتَخَفَّ قَوْمَهُ فَأَطَاعُوهُ إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَوْمًا فَاسِقِينَ. He manipulated them, he deceived them, and they were very light, they were not intelligent. They listened to him and obeyed. They listened to him and obeyed him. Why? إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَوْمًا فَاسِقِينَ. They were sinners. They wanted the pleasures of the flesh, and he gave them what they wanted, so they obeyed him. Right? It was very simple. He gave his population, showered them with wealth, showered them with money, appealed to arguments about tradition and arguments about religion in order to keep them in line, in order to guarantee their support if he opposes the request of Musa alayhi salam. Again, I'm telling a story, but I want you to relate that story to many of the things that are happening. The same exact process today unfolds, carrying different names at different places with different dates, but it is the same exact process. Sunnatullahi fi at-taghyir. This is the law of the universe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deploys every time whenever nations and peoples are changing. Musa acknowledged all of that. He understood, my mission is non-violent. My mission is to change. My mission is to deliver the Israelites. I should not provoke Pharaoh. I should not give them reasons to persecute us further. Right? In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran tells us that He revealed to Musa and Harun to basically ask the Israelites to establish their homes and to pray inside their homes. No public displays of religiosity. Don't practice the religion of the Israelites publicly because you will provoke Pharaoh and his soldiers. Don't give them any reason to attack you. Pray at home. فَاجْعَلُوا بُيُوتَكُمْ قِبْلَةً. Take your own homes as a qibla and just pray there. Don't provoke them. Right? Now what happened? Did things actually change? No. Pharaoh continued his process of persecution. He continued the rejection of the request of Musa alayhi salam. He continued to torture the Israelites and to use them as slaves. Now Musa alayhi salam did everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him to do. Take your brother and go admonish Pharaoh. Right? He says, Ya Allah, I'm not as eloquent as my brother. He says, no, both of you have to go. Right? Use nice words. Use wise and kind and polite words to speak to Pharaoh. He did that. No public demonstrations or displays of religion. Don't provoke him. He did that. Don't use violence against him. He did that. None of that worked. Now what do we do now? Musa alayhi salam waited for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to inspire him. And now was the time for God's intervention. It was time for miracles. Let's see if that works. Right? How many miracles did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cause Musa to show Pharaoh? 9 miracles. Right? وَاضْمُمْ يَدَكَ إِلَى جَيْبِكَ تَخْرُجْ بَيْضَاء مِنْ غَيْرِ سُوءٍ فِي 9 آيات. 9 miracles. By the way, let us just go through the list of those 9 miracles. The very first one is his hand. He puts his hand into his garments. He takes it out. It lights up. It becomes like a torch. Right? So that's number 1. What was number 2? The staff that turns into a snake. Right? And then the Quran in Surah Al-A'raf tells you 5 consecutively. Right? Al-Tufan. Al-Tufan. والجراد والقمل والضفادع والدم. Right? Al-Tufan is a flood, so the Nile is flooding, subhanallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the very honor of Egypt to destroy it. إِنَّ لِي مُلْكُ مِصْرَ وَهَذِهِ الْأَنْهَارُ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِي. This is what he used to brag, I control the dominion of Egypt and all of those rivers, they flow under me. Now they're flowing over you. Al-Tufan, the flood. The locusts, right? Al-Qummal, lice. Those little nasty insects? They would comb their hairs and floods of lice are falling out of there. It's extremely annoying, right? Sucking their blood. And then frogs, there would be frogs in their food, frogs under their sheets. Everywhere they go, they're stumbling upon frogs, right? It's pretty disgusting when they just have frogs everywhere. And dam, water itself would turn into something that is nasty, just like blood. It has this stench of blood. They cannot use it to drink. They cannot use it to basically cultivate their lands. Nothing. So that is 2 and 5. That is 7. And the scholars mention 2 ayat in the Quran to cover 8 and 9. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ أَخَذْنَا آلَ فِرْعَوْنَ بِالسِّنِينَ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ. We have caused their lands to basically lose the ability to cultivate. They cannot plant agriculture anymore. There's no agricultural products anymore. And for an agrarian society such as Egypt, that is destructive to the economy. As-Sinin, the passage of time, and they keep cultivating the lands and there's no yield. There's no harvest. Right? And then the 9th one, Musa alayhi salam says, رَبَّنَا اطْمِسْ عَلَىٰ أَمْوَالِهِمْ واشدد على قلوبهم فلا يؤمنوا حتى يروا العذاب الأليم. ربنا اطمس على أموالهم. What does that mean? Cause their wealth to drown. Literally? Maybe, because all of their lands now drowned in the flood of the river Nile. But more interestingly, the scholars say that their wealth lost the ability to buy stuff. So you would need so much money in order to buy little things. What's the word we use today for that? Inflation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused inflation and the prices have risen so much. Itmas ala amwalihim. Money had no value anymore and they were destroyed. Now, just to connect the dots, why is it that Pharaoh did not let the Israelites go? Because he was worried about the economy. How did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punish the people of Egypt? By destroying the economy. Allah went after the very thing they were so worried about and He destroyed it. Subhanallah. That's what He does. Did any of that stop Pharaoh? No. He continued to persecute and punish and kill. In fact, he continued his brutal policy of killing the firstborn son in every family. قال سنقتل أبناءهم ونستحيي نساءهم. I will continue my policy to take the life of every firstborn son and to preserve the lives of the females. Why? Because I'm worried that the firstborn son is going to rise against me? No, that already happened. Musa alayhi salam has risen already. But he continued the policy in order to show them who's in control. قال سنقتل أبناءهم ونستحيي نساءهم وإنا فوقهم قاهرون. To show them that over them we maintain full and absolute control. Subhanallah. Despite all of those miracles, all of those signs, al-ayat, Pharaoh continued his persecution. And I want you to understand the psychology of the Israelites at the time. I mean, they were humiliated and persecuted, but they were surviving. Now they have to endure all of this pain and all of this torture to the extent that they started complaining to Musa alayhi salam. قالوا أوذينا من قبل أن تأتينا ومن بعد ما جئتنا. We are being tortured before you come, and now we're still being tortured after you've come. You have not made any difference, right? قال عسى ربكم أن يهلك عدوكم ويستخلفكم في الأرض فينظر ماذا تعملون. Be patient. Wait. The light is at the end of the tunnel. Victory is within reach. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might destroy your enemy and establish you on the earth and give you another dominion. Subhanallah. I want to ask you a question. If Allah knew that none of that is going to work with Pharaoh, why did He eventually give His permission to the Israelites to cross into Sinai in the middle of the night? Do you think this whole process took days or months or years? Years. It took years. Some say it was 2 decades of persecution in Egypt, and Musa alayhi salam endures and perseveres. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala subject them to years of persecution, knowing that they will eventually have to flee against Pharaoh's will? I will answer that question inshallah in the second khutbah. I ask Allah to accept our good deeds, to forgive our sins, and to establish us with firmness on His path. Raise your hands and pray to Allah and seek His guidance and forgiveness. ادعوا الله وأنتم موقنون بالإجابة. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعين به ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فهو المهتدي ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأصلي وأسلم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم في الأولين وفي الآخرين وفي الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين. My dear brothers and sisters, today we remember the journey of Musa alayhi salam and the Israelites out of Egypt through Sinai into Palestine, fleeing persecution non-violently. And I mentioned in the course of the first khutbah that the request that Musa alayhi salam had to Pharaoh and to the people of Egypt was very simple. Deliver my people, let my people go. He was not requesting them to change their ways or change their religions. Keep what you have, but let my people go. And Pharaoh's response to that was very focused on the economy. If he let a slave force of hundreds of thousands of people, it might bring destruction to his economy. and definitely destruction to his ego and dignity. So he refused to allow that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent one sign after the other, one miracle after the other, and Pharaoh and the people of Egypt still did not give heed to Allah's warnings. And then I end the first khutbah with a question. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that Pharaoh was so stubborn and he had no plans to deliver the Israelites, and that they eventually have to flee the country in the middle of the night, why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala subjected them to that torture, to that pain for, as some of the scholars say, a couple of decades? And my answer to that, brothers and sisters, is that people who got used to slavery and humiliation and tyranny do not change overnight. They cannot become freedom fighters overnight. They cannot become leaders and inspirations overnight. Change is painful and has a cost, and that cost usually involves blood. Every single country in this world that changed its situation to the better had to pay the dearest price. The lives of thousands of its sons and daughters. Civil wars and turmoil is how this world changes, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't like that. I wish it was never like that. But this is the price, because it digs a crater into people's memories that continues with them generation after the other. It creates precedents and offers them guidance. This is how history is made. And if we were to think that peoples in the Middle East and around the world who lived under tyrants for hundreds of years will automatically become great democracies overnight, you're wrong. The people of Syria are paying the dearest price right now. It took Iraq over 10 or 15 years, and they are still in turmoil. Egypt, it took 18 days to get rid of the Mubarak regime, but the country is still struggling and will continue to struggle for God knows how many years. This is the price of change, brothers and sisters. But once the people are trying to change themselves, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala interferes with His miracles. When Musa and the Israelites stood their ground and fought non-violently and struggled against tyranny, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala eventually delivered them. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. They start the change, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues the process. Allah wanted to prepare the Israelites to become فَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا لَمَّا صَبَرُوا. As the Quran says, we made them into leaders and guidance and inspirations to others when they persevered. For the Israelites to attain God's chosen people, they had to go through that experiment. They were being prepared to fight the Philistines and to establish their nation. This is how victory came from. Now let me ask you a question. From your knowledge of geography and history, how many times did Musa alayhi salam travel across Sinai in his lifetime? How many times did Musa cross the Sinai desert in his lifetime? Remember? It was obviously once when he was crossing with the Israelites. We all know about that one. But did he ever travel that route before? When? When he was traveling into the city of Midian in Iraq. Remember? Now in that story, did you ever gather that Musa crossed a waterfront? No. It was never mentioned in the Quran, it was never mentioned in the Hadith. Now in the second time, did he cross a waterfront? Obviously, that's the whole point. Splitting the sea. Why is it that the first time he crosses the desert without crossing the water, and the second time he does? Can you cross directly from Egypt into Sinai without crossing water today? You can't, because there is the Suez Canal, right? Now the Suez Canal connects the Mediterranean with the Suez Gulf. So if you go north of the Suez Gulf, you can cross into Sinai directly, right? Without necessarily having to cross water. Why? Because the Suez Canal only dug 150 years ago. It wasn't always there. So in order for Musa alayhi salam to actually cross a waterfront, he has to do what? He has to go south and then penetrate and cross over the Suez Gulf in order to get into the Sinai Peninsula. Why did he do that? Why did he do that? Why didn't he just follow the same route he took before when he went to Midian? And I want you to imagine the level of resistance among the Israelites. Musa, you're going the wrong way. We can just, if we just go north, we will bypass the Suez Gulf and we can just enter into Sinai. Why do you have to go south? We will come to the waterfront and then we don't have any ships we can't cross. Just don't worry about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired me to do this. Just follow me. Just trust me. Why did he do that? The scholars say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was, one, testing the Israelites. That was one of their final tests. But most importantly, he was luring Pharaoh and his soldiers to their destruction. Al-istidraj. Right? وَالَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا سَنَسْتَدْرِجُهُمْ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Those who give the lie to our signs, to our miracles, we will entice them and lure them gradually into their destruction. And this is precisely what happened. People of Egypt woke up one of those mornings. They're calling their butlers and their servants to prepare breakfast. And no one is responding. They're not responding. Oh my goodness, where did the Israelites go? And the word came to Pharaoh, hundreds of thousands of them fled the country overnight. Isn't that like an incredible mass displacement, voluntarily mass displacement of a people? They didn't have any Twitter. I don't know how they did it, honestly. Hundreds of thousands had to communicate overnight to leave their homes with their families and children and belongings without their masters knowing. And that is efficiency right there. That was an incredible, incredible success. So Pharaoh was deeply and profoundly insulted. How could they do this to us? It is a crime, it's against the law for a slave obviously to flee, right? But this is an insult against my dignity and my honor as a king. 20 years I kept saying no. Now they just think they're just going to leave the country. So what does he do? He mobilizes the entire army to go after them. And the army was faster than people who are walking on foot. So the Israelites arrive by the waterfront, that is probably the Suez Gulf. They're standing there. And then they're looking at Musa. Didn't we tell you? Didn't we tell you it was going to come down to this? Here we are. Now show us what you're going to do. Aeroplanes haven't been invented yet. What are you going to do now? And to make matters worse, they turn their faces and they see the army of Pharaoh coming in the distance. فَلَمَّا تَرَاءَ الْجَمْعَانِ قَالَ أَصْحَابُ مُوسَى إِنَّا لَمُدْرَكُونَ. When the two groups saw each other, those who were closest to Musa said, oh my God, we're gone. They caught up to us. We're dead. They got us. There's no way to go. And with the utmost strength and perseverance, Musa alayhi salam says, Kalla. No. No way. Inna ma'iya Rabbi sayahdeen. My Lord is with me, and He will never abandon us. He will guide us. He brought us all the way to this point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not abandon us. وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى مُوسَى أَنِ اضْرِبْ بِعَصَاكَ الْبَحْرَ فَانْفَلَقَ فَكَانَ كُلُّ فِرْقٍ كَالطَّوْدِ الْعَظِيمِ. And that is the moment when Allah inspired Musa alayhi salam, point your staff against the sea. And then the sea was split. And on both sides, it was those two big mountains of water. And a passage was created. And I can only imagine the satellite view of the Suez Gulf at that point. Imagine this little canyon across the Suez Gulf all the way leading up to the Sinai Peninsula. And the believers crossed, right? And Pharaoh, subhanAllah, see, he's being lured to his destruction. Rather than stopping for a second and just thinking about the miracle he's experiencing, he does what Hitler did, and he goes into the Soviet Union during the winter, right? He goes into the canyon that was created, right? Thinking that somehow he can take advantage of God's miracle to his own benefit and destroy the people for which that miracle was actually created. Extremely ironic. The very last man of the Israelites was able to cross. And then when the last man crossed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused the water to collapse. And the canyon was filled with water again. And every single man in Musa's army, in Pharaoh's army, was destroyed. except Pharaoh himself, who was a very good swimmer. So he kept trying and trying and trying. And then when he finally felt that he was about to die, he was like, oh shoot. If Musa's God is for real, then I have totally devastated myself in this life and the next. Wait a second, can I convert to Musa's religion right now? Right? قال فلم حتى إذا أدركه الغرق قال آمنت أنه لا إله إلا الذي آمنت به بنو إسرائيل. When he was about to drown, he said to himself, I believe in that same God that the Israelites believe in. الآن وقد عصيت قبل. Now, after all this, after your sinning and your rejection, you think that you can accept God now? It's too late. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused him to drown and preserved his body. That's, historians and archaeologists are actually saying it's still preserved to the present day in museums in Egypt. فَالْيَوْمَ نُنَجِّيكَ بِبَدَنِكَ لِتَكُونَ لِمَنْ خَلْفَكَ آيَةً. He was saved in the flesh so that he continues to be a living example, a living sign for that battle between good and evil that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in which he gave victory and triumph to good. Remember that, brothers and sisters, one of the most incredible stories that mankind had ever experienced. More than 35 times it was mentioned in the Quran. And the Prophet's name, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, was mentioned 2 or 3 times in the Quran. But Musa's story, because it epitomizes that struggle between good and evil and how nations change, was mentioned in the Quran over 30 times. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in knowledge of the Quran, to increase us in knowledge of history, and to help us implement that knowledge in ways that will only bring us closer to Him. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us humble our character, to help us better our ethics and morals. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us strengthen our iman. And I ask Him to help us show Him the best of manner, the best of character in this month of Al-Muharram and the rest of the year. Allahumma ameen. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make each and every one of us an inspiration to others. And I ask Allah to help us inspire others with our words and our positive and good actions. Allahumma ameen. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give support and strength to our brothers and sisters in the Middle East and other parts of the world that are struggling. Our brothers and sisters in Iraq, our brothers and sisters in Syria, our brothers and sisters in Palestine and in Afghanistan and in every part of the world in which there's struggle against tyranny. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to provide them with a speedy triumph and victory. Allahumma ameen. اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أسررنا وما أعلنا وما أنت أعلم به منا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين اللهم أعنا على الدعوة إليك اللهم أعنا على الدعوة إليك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة واجمع حولنا القلوب والعقول اللهم أعنا على رفع رايات الحق في هذه البقاع واجمع حولها الناس اللهم يا ربنا تقبل منا صالح أعمالنا واغفر لنا ذنوبنا وتقصيرنا وأعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك اللهم أنزل نصرك الذي وعدتنا على عبادك وأهلك في سوريا وفي بقاع الأرض يا رب العالمين اللهم احقن دماءهم وانصرهم على عدوهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات يا رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة إن الصلاة كانت على المؤمنين كتابا موقوتا